The sky over northern Germany in the spring of 1943 was a place of tension, silence, and unrelenting danger. The clouds hung low and grey, heavy with the threat of rain, while below, the endless churn of war seemed almost invisible from the air. In the cockpit of a sleek, dangerous new German fighter, a young pilot tightened his grip on the controls, his knuckles white, his eyes scanning the horizon. The aircraft he flew was unlike anything the Allies had ever seen, a machine of almost mythical speed and power, capable of outmaneuvering almost any plane in the skies. For the Luftwaffe, it was a symbol of hope, a secret weapon meant to turn the tide of a war that was beginning to slip from their grasp. This was no ordinary pilot, and this was no ordinary plane. It was the Focke-Wulf Fw 190D, the Dora, a refinement of an already formidable fighter. Its long nose, powerful engine, and innovative aerodynamics made it faster and deadlier than almost anything else in the air. To fly, it was to dance on the knife's edge between triumph and death, and in the hands of someone who understood it, it could rewrite the rules of aerial combat. But for the Allies, the plane was still a phantom, a rumour carried by fragmented reports and terrified accounts from those who had glimpsed it from afar. No one had ever seen one up close until that fateful day. The young pilot's name was Heinrich Lange, though history would only remember his actions indirectly. He was like many others of his generation, swept up in a war he barely understood, trained to follow orders, to fly, to fight, and to survive. He believed in his mission, believed in his comrades, and above all, believed in the power of the machine he flew. Yet, deep inside, there was a growing unease, a recognition that the war was changing, that the Allies were learning, adapting, and growing stronger with every passing month. Even as he ascended into the grey sky, every instinct told him that the Dora, for all its might, was only a tool, and in war, tools could be lost in the blink of an eye. Heinrich's assignment that morning was routine, or so it seemed. A patrol over the North Sea, watching for incoming Allied bombers that had been striking targets deeper and deeper into German territory. The radio crackled with reports, some urgent, some mundane. The Luftwaffe was stretched thin. Every aircraft was precious, every pilot even more so. As he climbed above the clouds, the wind rushing past the canopy, he could see the shimmering outline of the sea below, calm and deceptive. Above him, the sky seemed infinite, a vast theatre in which destiny would soon play out. But routine is a dangerous word in wartime, for it is in moments of routine that history often slips through the cracks, unnoticed, until the consequences are unmistakable. Heinrich's Dora had been meticulously maintained, every bolt checked, every system optimized for maximum performance. It was faster than anything he had flown before, and in skilled hands, nearly unstoppable. He felt a thrill, a dangerous, intoxicating mix of pride and fear. But fate, as it so often does, has a way of undermining even the most careful plans. Hours earlier, intelligence reports had hinted at increased Allied reconnaissance in the area. There were whispers of new radar technology, better navigation, and aircraft that could strike with terrifying precision. Heinrich knew the risks. He understood that one small mistake could lead to death or worse, capture. Yet, he was confident in his training, confident in his plane, confident that the sky still belonged to those who dared to control it. He would never imagine that by the end of the day, he would unwittingly hand the Allies a treasure of unimaginable value, a fighter that would teach them secrets they had long sought, and shift the course of the war in ways no one could have predicted. As he approached the designated patrol area, a thin strip of coastline appeared, beneath the clouds. The sea reflected the grey sky, broken only by the occasional whitecap or the distant trail of a cargo ship. Heinrich adjusted his controls, feeling the Dora respond with uncanny precision. Every movement was mirrored perfectly, every command executed flawlessly. This plane was an extension of himself, an elegant predator gliding above a world at war. He could feel the heartbeat of the engine, the surge of power under the hood, the delicate balance that allowed it to soar faster than any Spitfire or Mustang he had ever encountered. It was, in many ways, a work of art, a lethal, terrifying work of art. And then, in an instant, the unexpected occurred. A momentary miscalculation, a sudden gust of wind, a small mechanical quirk, the kind that every pilot fears but learns to live with, sent Heinrich off course. At first, it was subtle, almost imperceptible. He believed he was still over friendly territory. The radio was silent, save for the occasional crackle. The clouds had thickened, and the horizon was obscured. Heinrich trusted his instruments, trusted his instincts, but both would betray him. The compass wavered, the clouds shifted, and suddenly, the coastline below was not German, it was foreign, entirely foreign. And in that single, heart-stopping moment, Heinrich realized he was lost. Panic is a curious thing. It does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it is a cold, sinking certainty that the world as you know it has tilted. And there is no right way back. Heinrich tried to correct, tried to navigate, tried to find the familiar markers of home, but the wind, the clouds, the relentless pull of chance conspired against him. Below, he could make out the contours of a strange landscape, green fields, rivers, and buildings unlike any he recognized. Across the radio, an unexpected voice crackled, English, clear, calm. And then, the impossible truth hit him. He was over enemy territory. Not just enemy territory, but American-controlled territory, far from the reach of his comrades, far from any hope of rescue. He was trapped in the sky with the one thing the Allies could not yet understand, and fate had placed him directly in their hands. What happened next would become the stuff of legend. Heinrich had a choice: fight, flee, or surrender. Every instinct screamed at him to turn, to push the Dora to its limits, to evade capture. Yet, as he scanned the horizon, as he felt the precise control of his machine and the impossibility of returning home without detection, a cold realization settled over him. He had nowhere to run. The skies were unfamiliar, the ground dangerous, and the Allies below were already aware of his presence. In that moment, the Dora, that symbol of German engineering, became not a weapon of power, but a key to understanding, a gift of unimaginable consequence. Heinrich Lang, through a combination of error, circumstance, and fate, was about to hand America a secret that would alter the balance of the air war forever. It was a mistake that would reverberate through history, a single pilot and a single plane colliding with destiny in a way no strategist could plan for. The Allies would soon get their first close look at the Dora, study every curve, every engine component, every control surface, and learn lessons that would save countless lives and turn the tide in battles that raged across Europe. For Heinrich, it was a moment of terror, of desperation, and ultimately, of helpless surrender. But for the world, it was the beginning of a revelation that would forever change the nature of aerial warfare. The clouds parted, the fields stretched below, and a new chapter of the air war was about to unfold, a chapter that would owe its beginning to a single accidental flight, to a pilot caught in the grip of fate, and to a machine of unparalleled design. The stage was set, the players in motion, and history, as it often does, waited for no one. Once Heinrich, Lang had landed, or rather, crash-landed, for the situation had left him with no other choice. He quickly realized the enormity of what had just happened. His Dora sat, sleek and intact, on a quiet field far from any Luftwaffe airstrip, under the wary eyes of American soldiers who had never seen anything like it. The initial confusion on both sides was palpable. The Americans were cautious, unsure whether this was a trick, a trap, or a genuine gift from the skies. For Heinrich, there was fear, shame, and a strange, surreal sense of disbelief. How had a routine patrol led him here? How had his mistake turned into an opportunity for the enemy to gain the upper hand? The plane was surrounded quickly by engineers, mechanics, and intelligence officers who had long been hunting for the key to the Luftwaffe's latest secrets. They circled the Dora like a predator sizing up prey, their eyes wide with fascination and a growing excitement they could hardly conceal. This wasn't just a fighter, it was the embodiment of German technological ingenuity, an aircraft that combined speed, firepower, and maneuverability in a way that challenged everything Allied designers thought they knew. Every rivet, every panel, every instrument was examined with meticulous care. They took photographs, sketches, and notes. They measured the wings, weighed the fuselage, and even pried open the engine compartment to study the heart of the machine. For the first time, the Allies could see, touch, and understand the engineering marvel that had eluded them for so long. Inside the cockpit, the complexity of the controls astonished them. The panel was dense with dials and switches, each serving a precise function to maximize the plane's performance. Unlike older fighters, which relied heavily on brute power, the Dora's design emphasized balance and aerodynamics. Its engine, a refined and powerful inline V12, gave it unparalleled speed at high altitudes, allowing it to chase down bombers or escape pursuers with a grace that left even experienced American pilots awestruck. Every lever and pedal was a study in precision. Every adjustment could mean the difference between life and death in combat. The Americans marveled at the simplicity hidden within complexity, the elegance of German engineering applied to warfare with brutal efficiency. Meanwhile, Heinrich was escorted to a small tent, questioned carefully but respectfully. Despite the tension of the moment, he remained composed, knowing that any misstep could mean the end of his life. The Americans were eager for information, yet they also understood the value of letting the plane itself tell its story. Words could only go so far. Seeing the Dora in person, touching it, and running tests would reveal far more than interrogation ever could. And so, as he watched the men pore over his machine, he realized the extent of his mistake. One accidental miscalculation in navigation, one wrong turn through a cloud bank, he had handed the Allies a treasure trove of intelligence that would change their approach to air combat forever. The engineers and pilots worked tirelessly over the coming days, conducting tests that ranged from flight simulations to wind tunnel experiments. They dissected the aerodynamics, studied the weight distribution, and even took apart the engine to understand its unique supercharger system, which allowed for high-altitude performance unmatched by most Allied aircraft. Every discovery was documented, every breakthrough carefully analyzed. The Dora's performance figures, its speed, climb rate, maneuverability, became benchmarks for American designers, who began incorporating similar concepts into their own aircraft development programs. The plane was no longer just a trophy. It had become a blueprint for the next generation of fighters. What made the Dora particularly extraordinary, and why its capture mattered so profoundly, was its combination of raw power and engineering sophistication. It was not just faster, it was smarter. The design accounted for stability at high speeds, efficient fuel usage, and the ability to sustain heavy damage without catastrophic failure. The armament layout allowed pilots to deliver devastating firepower while maintaining agility, something that had frustrated Allied forces during dogfights for months. By examining this machine firsthand, the Americans could anticipate German tactics, develop counter-strategies, and create planes that could finally match, and in some cases surpass, the once insurmountable Luftwaffe fighters. Every maneuver Heinrich had performed instinctively could now be studied, understood, and anticipated by the pilots who would face German aircraft in the skies over Europe. The impact of the Dora's capture rippled far beyond the engineering tables and hangars. Word reached the top echelons of Allied command, and strategy began to shift subtly but decisively. American squadrons were now trained using insights gleaned directly from the plane. Pilots learned how to exploit weaknesses, how to counter the Dora's superior speed in certain situations, and how to engage it in ways that had previously seemed impossible. Battles that might have ended in disaster now had a fighting chance. The psychological advantage, long held by the Germans due to their technological edge, began to erode. Allied pilots approached encounters with newfound confidence, armed with the knowledge that the mysterious fighter they had feared could be understood, studied, and defeated. Historians later marveled at how a single pilot, through a series of small errors and unplanned events, had inadvertently changed the trajectory of the air war. Heinrich's mistake was a catalyst, but the story of the Dora's capture was more than just a tale of human error. It was a testament to the interplay between technology, intelligence, and the unpredictable nature of war. One accidental landing, one plane, handed to the enemy, became a pivot point that allowed the Allies to gain a crucial edge in the skies, a victory that was measured not in bombs dropped or cities captured, but in knowledge acquired and lives saved. As weeks turned into months, the Dora was flown by American test pilots, each taking to the skies with a mixture of awe and apprehension. They pushed it to its limits, discovering its strengths and vulnerabilities in ways that would have been impossible to guess from afar. Every climb, dive, and turn provided invaluable data. Manuals were written, briefings given, and the lessons of the Dora were integrated into training programs across the Allied air forces. It became a tool not only of understanding but of empowerment, a way for the Allies to close the technological gap that had long given the Luftwaffe an edge. Yet, amid all the analysis, the engineers never lost sight of the human element. They understood that a machine, no matter how advanced, was only as effective as the person at its controls. Heinrich's expertise, his instinctive maneuvers, and the way he handled the Dora provided insight far beyond what schematics alone could offer. His actions, accidental as they were, became a study in human interaction with technology under extreme conditions. And in this, the story of the Dora became not only a tale of machines and war, but also a story about the unpredictable power of individuals and the extraordinary consequences of their choices, however unintended. In the quiet hangars, amid the hum of machinery and the scribble of notes, the Dora was no longer just a German fighter. It was a turning point, a revelation, a reminder that even in the vast machinery of war, the smallest misstep can have enormous repercussions. The plane that Heinrich Lang had delivered by mistake became a beacon of knowledge, a secret that would shape air combat for the remainder of the war, and a story that would endure long after the engines had cooled. The Allies had been given a glimpse into the mind of their enemy, a window into the future of aerial warfare, and it was a gift that could not be overstated. The months following Heinrich Lang's accidental delivery of the Dora to American hands were some of the most consequential in the history of the air war over Europe. What had begun as a single, unplanned event now rippled through strategy rooms, hangars, and airfields, reshaping the balance of power in the skies. The Allies were no longer chasing shadows, they were learning to anticipate the moves of one of the most fearsome fighters the war had produced. And with that knowledge, they began to fight differently, to strike smarter, and to survive in ways that had once seemed impossible. American test pilots, some of the bravest and most skilled men in the skies, climbed into the Dora again and again, pushing it to extremes that would terrify most men. They measured its climb rate, tested its turning radius, and dissected its fire. Control systems. Every test flight revealed strengths, yes, but also vulnerabilities, small, exploitable weaknesses that had previously gone unnoticed. It was as if the plane itself had confided its secrets to those who dared to understand it. Tactics were developed based on this knowledge: when to attack, when to evade, when to exploit the aircraft's quirks. Pilots trained tirelessly, drilling maneuvers that allowed them to turn fear into opportunity, uncertainty into advantage. The once mythical terror of the Luftwaffe's latest fighter was slowly becoming manageable, predictable, and ultimately defeatable. In the skies over Europe, this knowledge began to manifest in deadly ways. Dogfights that had previously ended in disaster for Allied pilots were now winnable encounters. The once intimidating speed of the Dora could be countered with teamwork, coordination, and clever maneuvering. Bombing raids were protected with greater confidence, and air superiority shifted, incrementally but decisively. The Germans, who had relied on secrecy and technological advantage, suddenly found that the edge they thought untouchable had been stripped from them. Pilots who had once struck fear into every Allied flyer now faced opponents who understood their machines almost as intimately as they did themselves. The impact was not just strategic, it was deeply psychological. The Luftwaffe had built the Dora to dominate the skies, to instill awe and fear in those who might oppose it. When the Allies began to neutralize its advantage, the aura of invincibility crumbled. German pilots were forced to adapt, to fight against tactics born from their own designs. Morale wavered as reports came in of Dora fighters being outmaneuvered and even shot down by planes that, just months before, could never hope to keep up. The war in the air was no longer a simple contest of raw technology. It had become a battle of intellect, adaptation, and anticipation. And at the center of it, all was a single mistake made by one pilot, flying a plane far from home. Yet amid this strategic upheaval, Heinrich Lang's story remained almost invisible to the public, almost lost to history. In a way, that was fitting. The Dora had given the Allies a secret weapon without a gun being fired, a weapon of knowledge and understanding. Heinrich himself had endured the tension of captivity, the uncertainty of how his error would be judged, and the quiet shame of knowing he had handed the enemy a critical advantage. He was a man caught in history, not by choice, but by circumstance, and his actions, accidental as they were, would echo in every subsequent dogfight, every aerial maneuver, and every strategic briefing for the remainder of the war. Historians later pieced together the extraordinary chain of events. They noted that the Dora, once feared as the pinnacle of German design, became a turning point in air combat. American fighters were improved using the insights gained from the captured plane, leading to more effective designs and tactics. Pilots who had once felt powerless in the face of German technology found confidence in their ability to confront it. Allied air forces began to dominate, not just because of superior numbers or firepower, but because they now possessed the knowledge to counter, predict, and outthink an enemy that had seemed untouchable. A single mistake had become a catalyst for broader change, showing how fragile advantage can be when faced with chance, error, and human fallibility. And yet, for all its impact, the Dora remained a symbol of human ingenuity and the unpredictable consequences of war. It was a machine designed for dominance, tested in combat, and ultimately studied, understood, and repurposed by those who had once feared it. The story serves as a reminder that in war, technology alone does not determine victory. It is how humans interpret, adapt, and respond to that technology that shapes outcomes. Heinrich's inadvertent gift was proof that even small, unplanned events can tip the scales in ways no one could fully anticipate. In the end, the skies over Europe were forever changed by a single pilot, a single plane, and a single error in judgment. The Dora had given the Allies not just insight into German engineering, but a chance to reclaim control of the air. Battles were fought with new confidence, strategies were rewritten, and lives were saved, all because one man, lost and unsure, had inadvertently handed the future of aerial combat into enemy hands. History, in this instance, was shaped by accident, circumstance, and the relentless curiosity of those who sought to understand the machine that had once seemed untouchable. As the war raged on, the lessons of the Dora endured. Pilots flew with greater knowledge, engineers designed with sharper insight, and commanders planned with a new awareness of the fragile balance between innovation and vulnerability. Heinrich Lange faded into the background of history, his name largely forgotten, yet his impact remained, etched into the tactics, strategies, and aircraft that followed. In the theatre of war, his mistake became a decisive moment, proving that even in the chaos of conflict, a single act, intentional or not, can reverberate across the course of history, shaping the future in ways both profound and enduring. And so, the story of the German pilot, who accidentally gave America the Dora, concludes not with a dramatic battle or a fiery confrontation, but with knowledge, adaptation, and the quiet, unstoppable force of human curiosity. It is a tale of chance meeting consequence, of error meeting opportunity, and of a machine whose secrets, once revealed, would forever alter the skies above Europe and the fate of the war itself.